Hey there, Live Like Your Nail Color gals. It's a new year, and maybe yours has started off with exciting new possibilities and a feeling of fresh motivation. Or maybe not. Maybe you're moving through transition and change, and it's just not easy. Today's gal pal, Lisa Tilstra, gets it. She knows firsthand that life's not easy, but it can be less difficult. And she's going to share how. I'm all for less difficult. I bet you are too. And even if life is pretty good right now, I think you're going to be deeply encouraged by today's episode. But first, before we dive into our conversation, have you taken my quiz to determine your nail color persona? All you have to do is go to livelikeyournailcolor.com/quiz. Answer a few quick questions, and in your results, discover your specific nail color persona, there are 5, your built-in strengths, and how to tap into those strengths when chip happens. Again, go to livelikeyournailcolor.com/quiz. Now let's get talking with Lisa.
Tired of so much chip happening? Discouraged by so much downer news? Weary from chronic crisis? Don't let the chips keep you down. Welcome to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast, where the tips of your fingers and toes are ready to inspire you to not give up and to keep creating the business, career, and life you want. In each episode, we flip the chip and let our fun nail color with that crazy fun name cheer us on to remember our strengths, embrace the power of choice, see life as an adventure, and know resilience is only a touch-up or change-up away. Get ready for a good time and a good laugh with your host, Mary Foley.
Welcome back, Live Like Your Nail Color gals. I took an extended holiday break from the podcast, and it's so good to be with you again. So let me ask you this. Do you ever make things harder than they have to be? Wait, can you feel that? It's all the women shaking their heads at the same time. Yes, life isn't easy. But today's gal pal, Lisa Tilstra, has a mantra I think we can all adopt, and that is make life less difficult. Now, Lisa knows firsthand that life isn't easy. When she was 24, her first husband discovered he had a brain tumor just 9 months after their wedding. She spent the next 4.5 years being a caregiver, becoming a widow, and starting all over. And that was before the age of 30. Throughout her 30s, there were a lot of ups and downs, including new careers, new love, moving to the other side of the world, starting a business, and then moving again. And yet, along with the challenges, there were people and experiences making life less difficult. Today, Lisa's a coach, a trainer, facilitator, and host of the Make Life Less Difficult podcast, which I highly recommend. And of course, it's about her mantra of making life less difficult. And she talks with all kinds of people about practical ways to do just that, make life less difficult, which I'm hoping she'll share some on our podcast today in our conversation. Lisa, welcome to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast.
Thank you so much, Mary. I am delighted to be here.
I'm delighted you are too. And hey, full disclosure, I'm on the East Coast of right now, as we're talking, of the United States. And you are where?
I am in Colombo, Sri Lanka, 10.5 hours into the future and at the end of my day. And it's going to be a great day. I just want you to know you've got a lot to look forward to.
We appreciate that here on the East Coast of the United States, and actually all the United States, because we're the leading edge of the timeline in the United States. So I appreciate that. And also, I really appreciate that you've taken some extra time at the end of your day to do that and to have this conversation. So thanks again. And one of the things that is a little different, of course, on this podcast is that instead of jumping right into the topic, I first always ask the women who are guests to take my quiz, what is your nail color persona? Just a fun way to get to know you and a little more about you first. So what did you find out is your nail color persona?
So I'm going to tell you what I did, and this will reveal a little bit about me as a person.
Sure, yeah.
I took it 2 times, Mary, because the first time I took it thinking about my toes,
yep.
And the second time I had to go back and take it thinking about my fingers because I live in different worlds when it comes to nail color of my toes.
And you're not the only woman
that's
done that, just so you know. Okay. So great.
So my toes are a glitter gal.
Yeah.
and my fingers are naked Nelly.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you know what? You are so in the majority on this. Not
Am
necessarily.
I?
Yeah. There's like the highest percentage of women who, like when I did a survey, it was that the most what women do is they paint their toenails.
Okay.
And then they're naked on their fingers. So you are with so many gals. But I love the fact that you decided at first I'm going to do toes, right? Because it does, the quiz does say, well, kind of like what's your go-to, right? Fingers or toes. So you went with glitter gal. So in terms of glitter gal, the description of a glitter gal, that persona, was there anything about that you particularly related to?
I liked it. I felt I don't know, a sense of energy and excitement as I read through it. And so there's definitely a part of me that resonated with the glitter gal.
Okay. Well, all right. I have high expectations of our conversation about it's going to be a lot of energy, positive energy and fun, right? Glitter gals bring the fun. Sometimes they bring the bling that goes with the fun. They bring the shine, but it's really about their energy. So thank you for that already in advance. Now, it also asks you if you have a go-to fave color and to see if that resonates with you as well. So what did you come up with?
So if I don't think about the time of year, I love the deep, deep reds. And I love that you ask about nail color names too, because a couple of months ago when I was getting my toes done, I was looking and there's all these different color reds, and I look at the name of the color.
Oh, good.
And so I'm looking at these different names. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting. And then I picked up this red, and it was Wonder Woman. And I was like, hello, this is mine. I have to look no further. And so that was really fun. So, but a very deep red is what I love most.
And the description of a red and what that reveals, I'm just going to read it really quick and have you comment on it. It says,
so curious.
A red nail color reveals that you are a woman passionate about life. You take action, you exude confidence, and inspire others. Risks are okay because life must be lived. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And we can make it less difficult while we're doing that. How about that? That's what I'm thinking. But I love that it's a deep red, right? It's really saturated. It's like, and Lisa is deep. If you go to your anyone, listen, go to your website, her website, makelifeleessdifficult.com. Podcast is there, blogs are there, but just reading it makes you go, I can do this, right? And we can make and listen to the stories that, of course, you've captured on your podcast. So that's great. I love it, Wonder Woman. Okay, so I have been known in the past of having a red cape, giving out red capes when I do workshops, just have a little bit of the Wonder Woman myself. I believe every woman has a red cape. Oftentimes it's invisible. All right. So that's perfect. I love that. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about that. One of my insights that, as I reflected on my 2022, that I shared in episode 30 a few months ago over Thanksgiving, the insight was, as I looked over the year, was transition is hard. Don't make it harder than it has to be, Mary, because I'm really good at making things harder than they have to be. And in 2022, I moved, I got married, I started this podcast, and those were like the big rocks, so to speak. And I moved because my mother is having some elderly parental issues, and my dad is trying to help, and I wanted to help more. So there's that's kind of trying to figure out what that looks like in terms of my part and what's going on there. So, your podcast and your work is around making life less difficult. And it really spoke to me just by the title alone, which just also says about titles of things, nail color, books, podcasts, movies. They really can speak just from that. Like I almost was like, I need to make life less difficult. But then I was like, let me see if I can get Lisa's take on this. And so, but what I'm curious before we do that, I know that in your 20s and your 30s, you've gone through lots of change. you're no longer in your 20s or 30s. And I'm pretty sure because you're still above ground and life moves forward. Like you said, tomorrow's already a good day for us here on the East Coast. But I'm just curious, in the last year or so, have you had some difficulty or some challenges in your own life?
Yes, actually, I have. When I think back to the last year and I listened to all the changes you went through, I resonate with a lot because I'm married to a diplomat. We move every couple of years.
Mm.
And this last year was not a big international move. And we really, at the start of 2022, we had high hopes. The effects of COVID were really decreasing. We were able to kind of get out, start to travel again. And then living in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, the country started to go into a real economic downturn and was on the verge of a crisis, which ended up turning into an economic crisis, which rolled into a political crisis, which continues as an economic crisis. And so as diplomats living here, it's an interesting experience because my husband's work keeps him here through mostly thick or thin. And like he would not leave unless things were really, really bad. But as a family member, I'm not in complete control of whether I stay here or not.
Yeah.
And so we were under constant evaluation. Are they going to have the families go back to the US? And it was quite unsettling. And my work is mostly I travel and a lot of it's virtual.
Mm-hmm.
There started to be flights being canceled and it was harder and harder to get out of the country. So I was like, okay, well, that impacts my work. My internet quality started going down. And I'm like, okay, so the two things I need to work are starting to deteriorate. It was really difficult just to get out and have any normalcy in life.
Oh, wow.
And even though we were fortunately physically safe, there was a lot of emotional turmoil and a lot of uncertainty that was difficult. And so when I think back of this last year, that really stands out. And it's been a year of unexpected uncertainty. We were really kind of hoping, this year doesn't involve an international move. It should be calm and relatively smooth. And it's been full of surprises.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm so sorry. I mean, it's just, it's after so much from the pandemic party, I like to call it. And that, it's and I have felt this like, all right, so now I've got my own personal life and something going like, okay, it's just get worn out from it all. Right. And you just really hope for things to be smoother, not because you necessarily expect life to be easy. You just want a break,
Exactly.
And yet the hits keep coming. And so, okay, more for us to learn, right? More for us to figure out how to grow, maybe in ways that we're like, I'm too tired to do it. Well, maybe, I do have something in my pinky toe that I'm going to pull out, or at least, because the alternative of giving up is, and just resigning to complete, like, well, whatever happens, happens. And it just, as Wonder Woman, I know for me, my Wonder Woman, I'm more like, I wonder what the heck happened and I wonder what I can do about it, right? Or wonder what how I can respond in a way that feels at least productive. So that really launches right into, how do you make life less difficult? You were in advanced training. That's one way I can look at it. You're getting like your PhD, because you already had your bachelor's and your master's. So now you're at the PhD. So I just really want to dive in. I'm sure everyone listening right now wants to know, all right, Lisa, what are some of your practical go-to ways that we can make life less difficult no matter what's happening?
Yeah. So let me tell you just a little bit of where this phrase comes from. I came across this in, I think, about 2016. I was reading a book about George Eliot, who I didn't know until that time was actually Mary Ann Evans. But because of the time period where she was writing, she couldn't publish as a woman. So she published under the pen name George Eliot.
Interesting. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So the quote that I came across was, "What do we live for if not to make life less difficult for each other?" And Mary, that resonated so deeply for me on all kinds of levels, both a personal and professional purpose statement. I had never seen it just captured so succinctly. And the first part of what do we live for if not to make life less difficult for each other? I know that given my personality, my nature, my upbringing, that part comes pretty naturally. I'm a natural people person. I tend to be naturally empathic and like to connect and help make others' life less difficult. The second part that stood out to me was, I make my life more difficult than it has to be a lot. And my husband, he'll give me a hard time. It's decreased since I've adopted this make life less difficult. But he used to say, Lisa, if there are 4 options in front of you, you will always choose the most difficult option in front of you. And I'm like, yep, guilty. And it caused me to kind of step back from that and say, well, what is that about? What is it? And what if I actually took some action to make my own life a little less difficult?
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler alert, what has opened up for me is that I find I am actually able to be there for others in more fulfilling ways. When I make life a little less difficult for me, it's like it gives back to others as well, which is really a beautiful piece. So that's the precursor to what do we do?
Right. Well, I was thinking, would that also be, since if I pick the less consciously, like I'm more aware of the slightly less difficult aspect, perhaps in life of the 4 options, and therefore it will require less energy, perhaps time, energy, emotional energy, physical energy, mental energy, all of that. So I could take that which is not expended and I could put it towards others.
Yes, that's a beautiful way of putting it.
Okay, great. So that's kind of like, in some ways, I don't know if we call it step 1, but a lot of this is awareness, because in the quote that you gave, it's easy, particularly I think as women, because we're natural nurturers and we're naturally often thinking of others so much that we put them first, or we put them at, and it feels good. That's why we do it. I mean, come on, right? But high performing women, which I would consider you one of, and there's a lot of women listening who are like that, who are not only trying to do the right thing, like they want to be the uber good at it, and it's, it brings some intrinsic satisfaction, but to go, I just make it harder on myself than it has to be. Let me dial this back a bit. And it's okay to dial it back. And I think that's the thing where I have to I can recognize it, but am I comfortable? I'm not as comfortable doing it because, one, it's not a habit. Okay. And there's that. But the other is, well, if I dial it back and I just do what's kind of good enough to deal, to respond to a situation, or good enough, is it okay with me? Because where is my identity? Did I attach it to being, excellent all the time? But is that ultimately really serving me right now? So we don't, the awareness is huge to peel it back before you just go, here's the 10 things you can do and the shortcut list.
Yes. And so when we think practically, it's interesting because some people react to the title of the podcast in a way that they say, I don't know about the title. Shouldn't we be trying to make life easier? Shouldn't we be trying to make life better? And I get it. I get where they're coming from. And I say, you know what? Whenever possible, I'm all for making life easier. And whenever possible, I'm all for making life better. What this idea of making life less difficult really gets to for me, though, is those times in life that are just plain old difficult.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, and there's no one who can fix it, and there's no magic wand. And part of it is, for me, it's an acceptance that there are going to be times in life that are really hard. And when I think back to everything I went through in my 20s with my first husband, it was an incredibly difficult time in life. There was nothing that could make it easier. There was no one who could make it better. But I tell you what, I could tell you stories all day long of people who were there for us, and they made it a little less difficult. And that to me is this heart of it, of saying, yeah, hey, you know what? There's going to be times that are really hard. what and who and how can I just look for ways to make it just a little less difficult so I can take that next step? Because sometimes that's all I got in me is that next step. And so that really is at the heart of this, of saying, yeah, sometimes life is really hard. And I truly believe that we can find ways to make it a little less difficult.
So this aspect of others, letting others help you too, seems to be part of it.
Yes. And it's so simple and so challenging, at least where I come from and how I was raised.
So why is that challenging for you? Because I think there's a lot of women who go, I probably can relate to where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family. We lived on a farm, 4 daughters. I was the youngest of the 4th, a little brother that came along 9 years later. But we grew up, and I remember my mom had this saying of, there's no such thing as a man's job around here. The women can do it all. And, you know, my mom developed a fierce independence over the course of her life because of various factors, and passed that along to us as her daughters. And there's a lot of great strengths that come from that. And yet I remember distinctly when I ended up quitting my job to stay home and take care of Eric in the last year of his life, and feeling quite a bit of overwhelm. And I had people offering to help, but I didn't quite know how to accept that. And I'm not sure the moment that it shifted for me, but there was some light bulb that came on that said, oh, wait a minute. The people who love us are also struggling and grieving and sad about what's happening to Eric, and they want to be involved and they don't know how. So if I can get myself to ask for help from them, it's a reciprocal gift, because they're able to be involved in our lives in a way that's meaningful to them. And it also is the only thing that helped us survive that time and helped me after he passed away. I mean, so inviting people into our lives and saying, yeah, I need some help. Could you come over? Could you cook? Could you this? Could you that? It was hard. And yet that perspective helped so much to realize, you know what, if I was the one watching my dear friend or sister or daughter or anything, I'd want to do anything I could, right?
Yeah.
And
then we don't know what to do. And so we're looking to that other person to tell us. So you gave them a gift by being specific. Could you come over on Wednesday afternoon? I need that. Or could you go to the store and get this? Could you, there's all of those. I think that's the specifics people are looking for oftentimes, because they don't want to intrude, but they also don't know what's helpful.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Wow. So that's where it starts, it sounds like. So I'm curious. So with that, where do we go? What else can we do to make life less difficult when we're in that difficult situation?
For me, the next part, I think about responsibility and taking responsibility for myself. And it connects to the awareness that you highlighted a few minutes ago, of recognizing, okay, I have 4 choices in front of me, and my go-to choice is the most difficult one. Now that I'm aware of that, what about if I take responsibility of thinking through, okay, well, what's behind that? What if I would choose something else that was a little less difficult in this instance? And being willing to say, okay, I have responsibility for myself. I have control of very little in this world, but of the things I have control over, I am most of it, right? I've got some influence over things, but there's a lot of things that I can't control, but where can I have responsibility for myself? And, a very recent example of this was in the summer months, as things here in Sri Lanka were really difficult. I actually had a trip planned back to the US for some family time. And I was so relieved to, get back there and just have some relaxation time. And I ended up extending my trip by an extra 4 weeks, which previously I don't think I would have let myself do, because I'd be like, no, I got to get back to it, and I've got to be there, and I've got to just be, it's nothing's too hard for me, and could I have come back and been just fine? I could have. And yet, you know what? It was a little less difficult to extend my time there, to have extra time with family and friends, do some creative work there. And I look back and I'm like, at this point, when I reflect back on that, I'm like, oh, good job, Lisa. You actually are taking action on making some things a little less difficult.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can imagine in the environment where in Sri Lanka, you said, it was hard to have some normalcy. There was lots of unexpected changes, that it could put you in a state of, or we could have that tendency of what's going to happen today, what's next, what I have to respond to and such. And then, and so when you left temporarily and you said I could relax, and then, but the mind goes, I'm sure it took a little bit to relax, because you were in a state of constant adjustment and constant what's going on. And then of course, irrationally, it would make sense, like, well, give yourself more time away from that, right? But no, our other tendencies can kick in to go, I got to get back, I got to help, I got to see what's happening, I've got to be in that. So I'm glad you took it when you could. There's that too.
Thank
right
you. Yeah.
Isn't it easy to think, well, particularly as well, I remember thinking, getting an awareness, particularly in my 40s, going, I grew up and I thought that this was good. It served me well, kind of, until it didn't, which was, it's good to have an ability to postpone some pleasure or postpone some reward, so that you're working towards it. And it's not always instant gratification. You need to have, I think, some ability to have delayed gratification, because things you want to accomplish in life, they are going to have their ups and downs, right? They're going to have their challenges. And so if you give up, if you have to get instant gratification or too quickly, you can give up before you can kind of get the reward and the achievement. Well, then it becomes a time where you're at middle age, where you're like, okay, I need to flip that some, because the time horizon ahead, not only is life never guaranteed, but you really kind of go, okay, statistically, if I need to take that trip I want to take, or I need to try that creative outlet, I need to do some of the things that I've been going, yeah, I'll do that when, right? Yeah. But boy, I still find myself defaulting to this, I'll do that, a year from now or something like that. And maybe that's not the best choice anymore.
I mean, it's such a challenging thing to figure out, Mary. And I really struggled with this after Eric was diagnosed with his brain tumor. And the way it worked, I mean, he was completely healthy. One day he had a headache he couldn't get rid of, and we find out he has a brain tumor.
Oh my God.
And so, to face that in my 20s, I remember about, I don't know, probably a month after he passed away, I went and got a life insurance policy for myself, because he had a life insurance policy. Really amazing gift for me. And he had gotten it early in life and I hoped he never needed it. Right. And I went, and I remember the insurance agent looking at me, he's like, you're 28, you're 20, almost 29. Like, you don't need this policy. Like, you're young. And I'm like, yeah, but my husband was 34 and healthy, and the next day he had a brain tumor. So I can't look at life that way anymore. And it's a challenge, right? Because there was quite a bit of time where I really felt myself living in like a sense of intensity. I have to get everything in. I can't pass up any opportunity to tell friends, family, I love them and care about them and all of this. And then over time, it's kind of like, okay, I've got to find a sustainable pace,
right? Yeah.
Of doing life.
Yeah.
I can't do everything right now. And, we hear about FOMO, right? The fear of missing out on things. And I have some of that, because I love to do a lot of things. I love variety. I like to learn lots of things. I would just go back to school and study all sorts of things if I could, right? I love this. And yet I read a book called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals this last year that kind of flipped it a little bit
I've
more.
read that too. Yeah.
Have you read it? Yeah. So
Yeah.
in there, he talks about the joy of missing out. And I didn't quite resonate with that joy of missing out, but what I flipped it to was the value of missing out, VOMO.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you know what? There is value in missing out on some things because I can't do it all. And so let me make my choice. Let me have awareness. Let me accept what is. Let me take responsibility for myself. Let me choose the things that are really meaningful for me right now, as I know myself, as I know my friends, my family, the situation, and recognize that there's a lot of other things I'm not going to be able to do because of what I'm doing right now. But the value of that is that I can be present here. And really, that's what matters. It's not getting all of these things accomplished and ticking all of these boxes. It's being present in the moments that we have, because we never know how many moments we have. And to go back to the people in my life over the years who have consistently made life less difficult for me, it's those people who just really were present with me and still can just be present. And so that is such an amazing gift. And I think that's really what I strive to focus on at this point in time.
Well, that is beautiful. And I don't know if this is, when you're saying value, if this is accurate. So what you meant, but here's what I was hearing. So is part of the value you had to, of the value of missing out was because you couldn't do everything. We all can't. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but it's hard to choose and hard to say no to ourselves. So I know one thing that I have done the last few years in this whole concept of essentialism is what really matters the most. Like I made myself rank order and really think deeply about the things, the people, the activities that I valued the most and why. And it wasn't a judgment of one or the other. It was force ranked because the reality is I could not do it all. So I'd say, well, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of my month, the end of the year, what do I want to say? I either got done for sure, or I spent time with, like, where did I put that time? Because that's the commodity that levels us all, right? So, by doing that, which was hard in some ways, but also freeing, because now I understood for myself what are the things I value the exact most and why, right? So it's not like I didn't value anything I was doing. I was hoping that they all had some aspect of value, but so I came to a similar place. I called it the new FOMO, the freedom of missing out.
Ooh, I like that.
But it wasn't a freedom of like, I'm just throwing everything out and I'm just not doing it right. And it was not a kind of a whimsical thing. It was a very deliberate, so that when the freedom, it freed me up, like, oh, I can say no to those things, or not now, because I'm super clear on what's most valuable to me. And that has helped me, I think, be able to be more present, just because I could let go. Like things were crowding up in the head, and in my heart sometimes, and in that struggle.
100%. Yeah, I love that. The freedom, the new FOMO, the freedom of missing out.
So, and that's only, when you said responsibility, that's only, we have to be responsible to ourselves. That's what I'm hearing. Like no one can force this upon us. We have to take the responsibility for ourselves to sort through that. Yeah.
And it can be hard work.
It can, that can be, it is, but hey, life is difficult. Right.
That's right.
I know you have what you call the archer kind of approach, right? Be an archer. And so I'm thinking that A is this awareness, the acceptance, I guess. Accept that life is hard, and R is responsibility. Do you want to share the rest of being an archer so we can hit the bullseye?
Absolutely. So the C is curiosity. and
Sounds
being
like fun.
curious. Yeah.
Can we get to some fun parts?
Yes. Being curious about myself, being curious about others. I grew up in an environment that I consider very loving, but also judgy, quite judgy. And so I had to learn curiosity, and curiosity pushes the pause button on judgment. And, we can get to the judgments later, but if we can just invite that curiosity in, it really opens up beautiful aspects of life and other people to us, which can make it less difficult. And then humility, I think, along with the acceptance and responsibility in the story I shared earlier of asking for help, it takes some humility of recognizing, hey, you know what? I have a hard time even saying it. I can't do it alone.
I can't do it. I'm hurting. Can you please help? Right? I don't like to admit I'm hurting or I'm less than, or less than I have been, and it's just not comfortable.
Yeah. So to step into that and say, okay, let me embrace humility, and then have empathy and respect is the E and the R. And so empathy, it kind of goes into a bit of self-compassion as well as empathy for others. And then respect is really important to me. I just feel like there's a lack of respect, just human to human, in our society. And it just seems to come with the way humans are wired up and tend to relate to each other somehow. And it's part of my passion behind doing my podcast and sharing people's stories, because I believe every single human has amazing stories to share. And I want to be respectful of each and every person that I interact with, and have curiosity towards them and have empathy for where they are. And so all of this gets wrapped up in hopefully making life a little less difficult
For others. With the respect, the prior, like, respect is the R at the end of Archer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would seem to me it would be more difficult to really be respectful and mean it if I hadn't taken myself through the other steps prior, or through the other phases, or through the other, because so much of this, accepting life is difficult, taking responsibility for I can't do it all, so what am I going to do, and being present, the curiosity, well, I've got to take some action to be curious, to ask questions, to explore. Humility is, well, that's it. I'm admitting to others, or I'm to myself first, like I can't do it all and I need some help. And it seems as though those are all things I have to do myself. I have to take that initial action. When you get to the E and the R at the end of Archer, now the empathy, it starts to be this, you even said empathy for yourself and empathy for others. So now you get this mix, right, of yourself and others. But by the time you get to respect, it really sounds like it's a focus on respecting others, perhaps in a whole new way, a whole new level, which is but it's an inside out job of respect. Because you've already been respecting yourself to get to that point, right? Respecting I need some time, respecting I need some, to think through this, respecting that it's my responsibility, respecting that, I'm a good, I can be a good human just like everyone else. So how do I do that? And that's at least, okay, that's the engineering Mary kicking in. All right. And some meta-analysis in that moment, but you're the one that has the Archer approach. So is that true? Am I looking at that accurately?
I love everything you just shared.
Oh, that's the quote that we're going to have to actually use later. I love everything you just shared. Could you say that again with Mary in it so I could just read this clip? Okay.
Mary, I love everything you just shared.
You're That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, I appreciate that. You have a great mind. I just love who you are too, Lisa. It was fantastic. Well, actually, I know this was born out of difficulty. I mean, that's the thing, but actually that just shows there's some beautiful things that can come out of putting yourself through the paces.
Yes.
That can help you and can help others. Because here we are. I love models and things that are easier for our brain to hook onto and remember and recall. Because when it's difficult, we don't go, we don't get intellectual about it, right? We just kind of go, our brain's gonna hook on like, maybe some curiosity would help here. Why don't you just ask more questions? Why don't you,
Yes.
Well, as I've looked some at your work and I was thinking about my own life, I have a really basic question that I think I know the answer to, but I really want your take on it. And that is, does transition always have to include loss and feelings of grief and depression and anger? I mean, it just seems like that comes with the whole emotional load. Is that, can we avoid that at all? Does it have to come with those feelings?
That is a great, great question. So here's my take on this, Mary. And speaking of models, I really love the William Bridges model about change and transition. And in that model, he talks about change is an event, it happens, but transition is the psychological process that follows. And he identifies 3 phases where there's an ending phase, there's a neutral zone, and then the new beginning. And depending on the change that has happened, sometimes we move through those phases very quickly. Other times it can take years. And sometimes we can get stuck in the ending or the neutral zone. And we never truly psychologically get to the new beginning. And so I have now been living outside of the US since 2012. And this is my 4th or 5th different country. I think 5th different country. And the interesting thing is that the transition for me into this life, we call it the foreign service life. And for me as the spouse, in some ways was emotionally more difficult than my transition to being widowed in my 20s.
Oh, wow.
And it did not hit me until years into this transition into moving overseas and living internationally and all of this. And I was really stuck. I was stuck in the neutral zone. I was not feeling myself. It just wasn't a great version of myself. I didn't know what was wrong, what was going on. And I literally was introduced to this model and I thought, oh, this is really helpful. And I was reading a book called Post-Traumatic Growth, and they were talking about different things that help us grow after traumatic events. And one of them was telling our story and having community. And I realized these things were lacking in my life at this point. And when I look back on that transition of when I lost Eric, I had amazing community around me. I had opportunities to share my story. And it was such an important part of my grieving and healing journey and process. And so sometimes the change of events that are very easy to see, others knew what happened. They knew Eric, they knew I was widowed, they knew to ask, how are you doing, Lisa? Like years later, people still ask, right? Because it's a really big external thing that people can see. Whereas my transition to international living and moving around the world and all of these changes, people kind of looked at and they were like, oh, that's really cool. Your life is awesome and amazing. And I was kind of like, yeah, but it's really hard too. And I'm really struggling. And yet nobody wanted to hear that part of it.
Yeah.
And I realized that I needed to find ways to start sharing my story. I needed to tap into community some way, somehow, because without that, I was not ever going to get to the new beginning. And I'm very grateful to say at this point, I feel like I have made it to the new beginning of my life living international, which comes back to saying, I feel like knowing this process of psychological transition I can proactively do things to support myself, get people involved in my life that make the transition, particularly that ending zone, that time of feeling of loss and frustration and anger, shorter. And it might still be there, but I feel like I can move through it more effectively. I can get into the neutral zone where I'm like, yeah, okay, it's fine. I don't love it yet, but we're making do. And then I can hopefully find ways to get into that place of new beginning. So I think that there's an element of going through those phases of transition. I also think that there are, again, ways that we can take responsibility. And it does. I think a huge part of it is involving other people in our lives and recognizing that when my brain tells me I'm alone and nobody would understand and nobody gets how I feel, if I just really, and sometimes I have to really push myself or force myself to call my sister or call a friend or send a message. And every single time I do, there's care, there's empathy, there's connection, there's, oh, I get it. Like, yeah, what you're going through is here and I get it. And I'm also, going through this. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this. And that makes it a little less difficult.
Yeah. Is that why, or one of the contributing reasons why you started your podcast, to speak to your story, but also to bring out other people's stories and by default create a community of
Yes.
listeners and create a community of podcast guests? I mean, and you can take that wherever you go around the world as you travel, which is a beautiful thing.
Yes. I had for years been looking for a platform to share stories because we connect as humans, we connect through our stories and we see each other. We develop this sense of common humanity when we share our stories. And I think really realizing that for whatever reason, it seems like the human brain loves to tell the story that I'm alone, nobody understands. I mean, we're in the midst of a global pandemic, Mary, and I'm sitting sometimes saying, oh, nobody gets it. Nobody understands what I'm going through. And I'd be like, hold on a second.
Yeah, right.
Pretty sure there's plenty of people out there that do, right? So recognizing, okay, this is a myth when my brain tells me this, and then here are the action steps I need to take. And hearing other people's stories, not everybody's in a place where they're ready to share their story. And so when other people are ready to share their story and then someone else hears it, and this has happened to me where it's been transformative for me to hear people's stories and just be like, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one, or I'm not crazy. I thought I was the only one thinking this or struggling with that. And hearing people's stories, like, okay, that it makes life a little less difficult. And that's the whole reason why I do this podcast.
I love it. I was thinking, and Wonder Woman needs a posse. I mean, Wonder Woman.
Yes.
And I say that out of my own, like, yeah, that's some of the things that you just said about sending the text, picking up the phone, reaching out. I'm Wonder Woman. I should be able to do it myself or be just fine. And then I go, the contrast is sometimes I wonder why I can't send the text. Like, why is it so much emotional energy, it seems, to do it? And like your experience, every time I do, I get a good response. I get, right? So I would say to every woman out there who has another Wonder Woman in her life who just seems invincible, she's not. Okay, so keep knocking at that door. So keep reaching out, because you have no idea how much that does mean to her, because most don't, because they think you're all, you got it all together. But the reality is we don't, which I think that's some of the humility when you were talking about your archer. That's just saying, you know what, I'm not all that. I can feel that way sometimes. And yes, I have moments of that, but but ultimately I'm not. It doesn't mean like I'm all crushed and weak. It just means I'm human. I think that's absolutely it's not like an either or.
And I'll offer this really briefly, Mary. Sometimes I know I struggle for myself. How do I even bring up what I'm struggling with? Because it's, it's all in my head and I can't really put it to words. And I have found a couple times, and there's a few, I can actually like see where I was calling a friend And she answers the phone and she's like, "Hey, how are you?" And I just said, "I'm struggling."
Mm.
And that's all I needed to say. And she's totally present and she's there, and it just opened the right door. And it's like, sometimes that's all we need to say. And most of us get it, right? Like, yep, okay, I get it. I've been there. And then to just drop into that presence. Yeah, you're not alone.
You're not alone, right? That's huge. Huge.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you have been outside the United States and basically traveling every couple of years, it sounds like for almost a decade now. Is the aspect of travel and living abroad. It's easy for us in the United States or anyone in the world who doesn't travel to other countries often to go, "Oh, isn't that cool? Isn't that sexy?" But you've said it's a full package of opportunity in that way. But how does travel and totally new experiences help make life less difficult? Because I'm wondering if your curiosity, like in the Archer method that or approach that you have, it just really strikes me as something that might have been so forefront for you in a new culture and in a new country that we could all learn from, for those of us who are mainly staying put and not necessarily having those ongoing grand opportunities.
Yes. Travel, living in different countries has been transformational. It has truly changed who I am, the way I think, the way I see the world, the way I see humanity. And it's so interesting because people often ask, "Oh, what's it like? I lived in Saudi Arabia. That's an interesting country. And what are things like there?" And, I'll start talking about some of the differences and the unique things. And then I find myself, no matter what country I'm talking about, I soon say, "But you know what? Like, the people are just people, and they have similar desires in life, and they want their kids to be safe and loved and taken care of and have opportunities, and they want to find meaning and purpose in their lives and contribute to their communities." And around the world, people are people. And I think it's so easy for our human brains to focus on the differences and what makes us, not like that group of people. And this can happen within our own country. It doesn't have to be internationally. And to come back to the common humanity, to step into that curiosity, the judgments are going to come. It's just the way my brain is wired up. But to be aware, "Oh, that's a judgment I'm making about that person, about that individual. What if I just set that judgment aside and added in some curiosity here?" And, traveling and being exposed to different cultural ways of doing things. And there's a lot that I'm just like, from the American perspective, I'm like, this just doesn't work well. Like, for example, in the Philippines, they told us, when you get there, okay, yes means yes. Yes also means maybe. Yes also means I'll think about it. Yes also means no. And yes also means absolutely not. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Yes, right? So I mean, like, from my American cultural values perspective, I can look and like, that's a terribly inefficient system of communication. And yet, if I step back and I'm curious about it, I'm like, wow, okay, people obviously figure this out. So what if I put my judgment aside and say, what an inefficient way to communicate, and say, okay, tell me more. What are you seeing in these different yeses? And how do you tell which yes is yes and which is no and which is maybe, and things like that. And so just really adopting that and making curiosity a practice, I think, is something that travel has instilled in me. Being willing to try any food. Sometimes it can be hard, but I'm like, okay, I'll try it.
Yeah. That's a practical practice right there.
Yeah.
Oh man, maybe I don't like, I mean, particularly when you're like, I don't even know what this is. That's the scariest one to me. Yeah.
So I think traveling one of the most beautiful things it has done for my life is instill in me this practice of curiosity.
We could keep talking. There's no doubt about it, Lisa. Even halfway across the world or all the way across the world. But we have to wrap up. And there's a very important question that I always ask my guests. And that is going back to nail color.
Mm-hmm.
If you could create a name of your own for a nail color to inspire us to make life less difficult, what would that nail color name be?
I love this question. And my nail color name would be Presence.
For all the things that you now, is it presence? Like, spell that for me, because it's like presence under the tree, or is it
presence as in being present with one another? And our presence is a gift. And I think of the nail color is like it's present with me on my fingers. It can be a reminder to just be present, even if I'm just, present with myself in the current moment. And then present with whoever I'm interacting with in the next moment. Presence, we really, I think, it's a challenging time in the world to be totally present with one another because there's so many distractions. And I find it is such an amazing gift when people are present with me. And then when I want to be able to give that gift to others. So presence, and you asked me to spell it, and I'm not going to attempt.
I understand. It's the PRESENCE.
There you go. Thank you.
CENTTS. Like in the, but the interesting thing is that when you are present with yourself or with someone else, you even said it's a gift. It's a present to them.
It is a present.
There you go. Your presence is a present to yourself and to others.
That could actually be the full name. The presence is a present could be the nail color name.
Oh, let's do it. Okay.
I love it.
Since we're here in this moment in the space-time continuum, let's call that present is a present. There you go.
That is brilliant.
I love it. Oh, yes. We are amazing individuals. I am telling you. I got it on tape earlier. I got the recording. So, and I'm just, it's just funny. It's just be able to laugh at ourselves. I know that people would love to learn more about you and your podcast. I know I mentioned before your website, makelifelessdifficult.com. Are there other ways that you would recommend that people reach out to you if they want?
I'm on all of the podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever people listen to their podcasts, they can find Make Life Less Difficult.
Got it.
I have a growing Instagram presence.
She's trying, people. She's trying. Let's help her out. Okay.
I would love if you would want to follow me there. But and yes.
Is your handle there, Make Life Less Difficult? Okay.
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Hopefully that makes it less difficult for people to find. Just Make Life Less Difficult.
It's one thing in our lives, making life less difficult. Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, we also appreciate the fact that it was available. Okay. So all these things could line up. All right. Because that's not always
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that. I will include all of that in the show notes. So you're listening. You can later just look online and whatever platform you're listening to, Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. And I will have the links there, which I appreciate that you go listen. Hey, this is a podcast to podcast friendly space is what I think is it's like the podcast is the new book. Yeah, you're going to say
indeed. And I would love to extend an invitation for you to come on the Make Life Less Difficult podcast.
Oh, excellent. We're on. Okay. And right. I might have to be 3 a.m. given when you book it. So
we'll find a doable time.
Okay, good. Because I would like to make it less difficult for me. Okay.
Yes.
This has been fun. This has been so helpful. Thank you for being present. It's been your present, and that's been a present to all of us. And here's to making life less difficult. Thanks so much. And now for the after party. I call it Flip the Chip, where I take a few moments to highlight something my gal pal shared that can help us all flip a challenge or a difficulty that's holding us back into something more positive that helps us move forward. What I want to highlight today is Lisa's approach to making life less difficult by being an archer. That means A, acceptance. Accept that life isn't easy, but it can be less difficult. Accepting this perspective is essential to finding that less difficult life. R, responsibility. It's up to you. It's up to me how I respond to life, its challenges, how I choose to see the people around me. I've got to take responsibility for myself, my choices, my life. C, curiosity. If I'm curious, I'm open to learning about myself and about others. When I'm curious, my judgments are paused. Curiosity opens my mind and my heart to see new perspectives. And then H in Archer, humility. Humility is about recognizing that there's more to learn, always. My way may not be the only way. There might be other perspectives worth considering. E, empathy. Recognizing and respecting the feelings and emotions of others opens the door to connecting authentically. I can have empathy even when I don't agree. It's an important step in the process of understanding and connecting. And lastly, respect, R. Respect is an expression of love. It must first be given to myself before I can give it to others. Regardless of our differences, I respect you as a fellow human wanting to make life less difficult. And of course, for me, I say you can always use your nail color to cheer you on by simply putting on a new color and giving it the name like presence is a present that Lisa suggested. Because being an archer requires awareness. And the fastest way to awareness is the practice of being present with yourself and others. It's truly the foundational gift of making life less difficult. You can make good choices to create the career, business, and life you want, one step, one nail color at a time. Look forward to being with you next time on the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. Ready to live and laugh more? Know a friend who could use some of that too? Then subscribe at livelikeyournailcolor.com or your favorite podcast app and share this episode right now with the person who popped into your mind. Together, let's flip the chip to be stronger, smarter, and happier.